Working on the Javelin today, we're doing a CVR starter install. The reason for it is I was putting this starter back in and the threads pulled out of the frame. There's really nothing wrong with the starter, and the first thought was just to put a heel coil in here. But the problem with that is we got a thick tube header in here and that starter was difficult to get out. The header actually had to come off and the engine had to be jacked up to get it out. This here is the opening that we had to shoehorn the starter through to get it out. And you can see the starter actually bolts to the transmission, not to the engine. This metal plate we're talking about clearancing for the flex plate bolts actually helps locate the starter. The reason I picked this starter is for the ease of working on it. It should be able to fit up in between there without having to move the header around at all. We'll have a look here. It fits up into the general opening like a champ. This starter can also be clocked in 18 different directions. Another nice feature, you can get away from the oil pan and the header. As it sits, I'm going to have to rotate it a little bit to make it work with my car. And before I go any further, I'm going to comment on this hole size. I'm getting about 3 1/4 with this caliper. This original type starter fits that perfectly, but this guy's a little bit on the short side. Looks like it's short by about 35 thousandths. The starter was tested, and then they included the test sheet in the box. There's some torque specs and things down there. That might explain why this thing looks like it actually turned a little bit. This bolt is tweaked, along with the one on the other side. I'm just going to put it in and see what happens. We're going to do a weight comparison here of these two starters. Looks like 17 pounds and 8.2, less than half of the weight of the original starter. I'm going to start the show by removing these two Allen screws and getting our clot correctly. So there's what that's looking like. I'm going to bolt this piece onto the car to set up my fitment. You can see all that play I was talking about. That's a bit of a disappointment. So my piece is bolted on there, and I can rotate this now on it to see about where I want it. And really I want it as far away from the header as possible. I'm thinking somewhere right in this neighborhood. The starter comes with some instructions. The instructions are calling for hooking up a wire for a solenoid at the starter. The original AMC starter just had a positive cable going to it. I think I'm just going to make a jumper wire here, and maybe in the future I could fuse it and use that as a no start switch for a security measure. I'm going to do a little bench testing to confirm. I've finally taken the time to cut a couple pieces of aluminum angle to make some soft jaw caps for my vise. I don't know, what do you guys think? Is it time for a new set of jumper cables? Going across both the terminals. Not spinning. Just having difficulty getting a good connection across here with these old crusty cables. So I'm just going to go ahead and make the jumper wire. Soldering it up, of course. I got tired of buying little strips of heat shrink, and I actually got some bulk stuff off eBay. Really liking these rolls. There it is installed. There is going to be a thermal blanket wrapped around this whole thing. We'll try our test again. I just realized that the way I want to clock this thing, I can't get my bolt in there. So the bolt's actually going to have to be in there first, and it's going to be a bit of a pain in the ass to install, but it will work. It's installed now. It's kind of tough to see, but we've gained probably about 2 inches of clearance on that positive terminal to the header, which is really nice. There's my heat shield wrapped up on it. The stitching's actually falling apart on the thing. I might have to get another one. I'll finish putting the rest of the exhaust back on and the rest of the transmission back in, and then we'll start it and see how it sounds. I had these tranny lines custom bent for the original starter, and they fit perfectly. And now this new mini starter actually hangs down a little bit more. I had to make some adjustments to get the tranny lines to work. I've unplugged the distributor. I'll turn this thing over for the first time, and you guys can listen in with me to see how she sounds. A little bit of a question there.
Is it disengaging?
Yeah, it is. We had a problem where it wasn't disengaging, and now it is with that little bit of movement. It kind of sounds like it's staying engaged for a second after the car is starting. Well, the jury's out on the starter at this point. I may order another one and see if it's machined any better than the first one. At least it's easy enough to get in and out of there. Well, I wasn't happy with the performance of this starter, and that movement kind of bothered me a little bit. It was getting hung up in there. There's a kind of a funny noise as it rotated. I started looking at the circle. You can see that screw hole has aluminum on the outside of it. Then you go to the other side and that's machined off. I took some crude measurements from here to here, and it's different. So I was thinking maybe I got a bad one. I got one of these starters in my Pontiac and it works great. So I got another one. So I took a measurement here, and we go into this thing. You can see it's also quite a bit different. And it's got the same deal where it's like it's not on center. So I'm going to send these two back and maybe try a different manufacturer. Our new starter came in. We went with the Power Master. This one says it's made in the USA. I believe the last one says it was made in Canada. Measuring this again, we got about 3,240. And this one's pretty darn close. I didn't get this one originally because it looks like it takes up a little bit more space, and it was quite a bit more expensive. But if it performs, it'll be worth it. This starter came with the dyno sheet also, and came with some instructions. It says that these gear reduction starters might actually stay engaged until the engine is started. So maybe that last starter that was normal, I don't know. I didn't like the sound of it though after the car started up. I put that same jumper wire on this guy. It looks like this starter can be clocked 3, maybe 4 different positions. This starter actually fit up there pretty easy, easier than the other one. It's not tight yet, but it fits in that hole a lot better too. I mean, there's a little bit of wiggle room, but not much. I don't have to do anything with my tranny lines either, leaving the starter in this position. I might have been able to tip it in just a hair more away from those headers, but I don't think like 1/8 of an inch is going to matter much. I just put a little bend in my cable end so it fits up there nice and clears that header. The bottom of the positive lug is like super close to the other terminal, so I think we're going to take it back off and clearance it. We're just going to trim a little bit of this on the bottom here off. Alright, we're going to try it with starter number 2 now. So we got the ignition unhooked.
Reminds me of a Chrysler. I'm a Chevy dude, so whenever my buddies with Mopars would start theirs, I thought, does that sound cheap? You know, but there's a gear reduction. That's why it's making that noise. There's like a 4-to-1 gear reduction, and they all use them for on race cars when you got high compression. When he was cranking it over, it reminded me of my buddies that have Chargers and Super Bs, and they always sounded so cheap. And being a Chevy guy, GM guy, I never heard that kind of noise before, and now, you know, after being around race cars and everything, you notice that Chrysler had a good idea. It was a gear reduction starter, so it makes more of that noise because they work better on a high compression engine. When you're trying to use a regular starter and it's got a direct drive to it, look at the size of this motor. You know, in order to turn over an engine. And you can get by on these little starters now with a gear reduction. You know how a bicycle works when you're in low gear going up a hill, or being in 10th gear. It's hard.
All right, we've warmed it up. We'll do a couple starts. I'm satisfied with it. We're gonna run it. That's it for this episode of Oldsmob 455. Be sure to comment. Thanks for watching.